Shabbat shalom. I think it's just us.
I know. Hopefully there'll be people online.
So
Were you
far.
allowed to go online last night?
So right now we had 33
Okay.
who have viewed the stream.
I just said maybe more for last night.
No.
Come on, it's so rare now.
Huh?
You need Dennis to do a nice job.
Yeah, it was lovely.
Did Corlin get back to Detroit?
No, we're heading up there later today. So we can be there for Mother's Day.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Hi, you need Rose, you don't need me.
Shabbat shalom. All good? You have that look. You have that look.
I do.
It was one of those mornings? Okay, then good. Good. Okay.
Hey, Rose.
Shabbat shalom. Okay, Rose, you're leading the service. Go.
Yeah.
Easier to follow along. I know that you are so brilliant at memorizing.
Probably not.
Yeah, we can set up a meeting, and we can see our.
She has one thing after this. That was seems to be her, like, some bizarre thing.
Well, it's not terribly uncommon, but and it's also treatable. Yeah, I used to do this all the time. Drops, this, whatever. When I was but you can participate in the process.
It's just so hard, you know, just not doable.
But it's just not really nice.
It's just so hard, and it must be 10 hours to do, but like, get over that.
That's a plan.
Yeah, it's very- I wouldn't want to do it.
All right, let's begin.
Greg, if you wouldn't mind, if you would listen out for the door,
Yes.
that would be lovely. Thank you. Okay. Page 74 or 192. Although I don't think anybody's online, so it doesn't really matter.
Where's your mom?
Yeah, really. My fan club here. Yeah, so that's fine. Okay.
Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenatecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenatecha Yisrael.
And we continue on page 194. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yatzar et ha'adam b'chokhmah uvaravo nekavim nekavim chalulim chalulim. Galui v'yadua lifnei chisei chavodecha, she'im yafatech echad mehem o yisatem echad mehem, אי אפשר להתקיים לעמוד לפניך, ברוך אתה אדוני רופא כל בשר, ומפליא la'asot. And after having blessed or thanked God for our bodies, we also turn to the next page and thank God for our souls, that which makes us individuals and separate and distinct. Elohai neshama shenatata bi torahi, ata varata ata yetzarta ata nafachta bi, v'ata mishamra b'kirbi, kol zman sheneshama b'kirbi, modeh ani lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei avotenu v'imotenu, ribon kol hama'asim, adon kol haneshamot, baruch ata Adonai asher b'yado nefesh kol chai, v'ruach kol basar ish. My God, the soul that you have given me is pure. You created, you shaped it, you breathed it into me, and you protect it within me. For as long as my soul is within me, I offer thanks to you, Adonai, my God, and God of my ancestors, source of all creation, sovereign of all souls. Praised are you, Adonai, in whose hand is every living soul and the breath of humankind. Baruch atah Adonai asher nefesh kol chai, v'ruach kol b'sar ish. And on page 198, we find the Nasim b'chol yom, those blessings. Now, who got up this morning and did the same thing they do every morning? Yeah, pretty much. And these series of blessings transforms those acts from simply things that we do to sacred things that we appreciate. The first one, lahavchin ben yom uven laila, to acknowledge the difference between night and day. That almost transitional moment where you're not sure if you're awake yet, you're not sure if you're asleep, and yet suddenly, oh, I'm awake. As you look up and the dog is looking at your face or something.
In our case, the cat is like on our chest.
Right, exactly. And then there's the moment of opening your eyes. And the following one is the sense of stretching. That sense of getting yourself out of bed. And as I get more experience in life, that those moments of straightening up after the night takes a little longer and a little creakier and more noises and all of that. And if you look at the bottom of the page, this is one of my favorite things. If you look at the bottom of the page, the last two words in Hebrew, you don't have to actually know Hebrew to get this part, but if you look at the last two words, zokef kefufim, zokef has letters that are more or less straight. You have straight line letters, which mean, and zokef means to straighten up. And kefufim means to be bent. And if you look at those letters are all letters that are rounded, curved.
Interesting. Interesting.
Right. So in that sense, you are straightening up the bent. Right. That moment in the morning where you kind of get the kinks out and the knees crack and all of those good things. And you sort of are able to start the day. And so as what we'll do is we'll actually, how do we want to do this? Back and forth or?
Back and forth.
Okay, good. So we'll do this, we'll join together. Pam will lead us and we will join in the response, which will be the following blessing. So we'll go every other blessing.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan l'sek v'vina l'chaltin ben yom u'ben laila.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokah haaretz al hamayim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish arumim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten li'aev koach.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Hama avir shenai me'enai utnuma me'afapai.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani b'tselem Elohim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani bachurim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani Yisrael.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Ozir Yisrael bigvura.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, oter Yisrael b'tifarah.
Amen.
On top of page 204, we join in our blessing for study and for worship. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Adonai our God, let the words of Torah be sweet in our mouths and the mouths of your people Israel, so that we, our descendants, and the descendants of all your people Israel may know you by studying your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Adonai, who teaches Torah to your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, hamlamed Torah la'amo Yisrael. And on page 206, let's join together, middle of the page. There are things that are limitless, of which a person enjoys the fruit of the world, while the principle remains in the world to come. They are honoring one's father and mother, engaging in deeds of compassion, arriving early for study, morning and evening, dealing graciously with guests, visiting the sick, providing for the wedding couple, accompanying the dead for burial, being devoted in prayer.
Making peace among people.
But the study of Torah encompasses them all. Page 212. Baruch Shamar v'hayah olam Baruch hu Baruch osev reshit Baruch omer ve'oseh Baruch gozer mkayem Baruch merachem al haaretz Baruch merachem al habriot Baruch meshalem shachar tov l'rayav Baruch chai le'ad v'kayam l'netzach Baruch podeh matzil Baruch shemo. Let's join together on the following page, page 213. With this do I prepare myself to thank, praise, and glorify my Creator. Blessed are you, Sovereign of life, whom we praise with songs of glory. Baruch atah Adonai melech mehulal batishbachot. And on page 214, join in a psalm, a song for Shabbat.
Mizmor shir liyom hashabbat tov lahodeh ladonai Ulzamer lishimcha elyon lishimcha Ulzamer lishimcha elyon lehagid babocher chasecha ve'emunatecha balelot Ale asar ve'ale navel ale higayon v'chinor mizmor shir leyom hashabbat tov lahodod ladonai Ulzamer lishimcha elyon Ulzamer lishimcha elyon.
And on the following page, we join in Ashrei again, antiphonally.
Ashrei yeshvei veitecha, od hallelujah selah.
Ashrei ha'am shekacha loho, Ashrei ha'am sh'Adonai Elohav.
Tehillah leDavid, aromimcha Elochai hamelech, v'yavarcha shimcha le'olam va'ed.
B'chol yom avarcheka, v'ahalala shimcha le'olam va'ed.
Gadol Adonai umhula me'od, v'ligdulato ein checher.
Dolador yishbach ma'asecha, ugvuratecha yagidu.
Hadar kavod hodecha, v'divrei niflatecha asicha.
Ve'zuz nerotecha yameru, ugdalatcha asaprena.
Zecher rav tuvcha yabi'u, בצדקתך ירננו.
חנון ורחום אדוני, ערך אפיים גדול חסד.
טוב אדוני לכל, ורחמיו וכל מעשיו.
ידוך אדוני כל מעשיך, וחסידיך יברכוך.
כבוד מלכותו יאמרו, וגבורתו ידברו.
להודיע לבני אדם גבורותיו, וחוד הדר מלכותו.
מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור.
סומך אדוני לכל הנופלים, וזוקף לכל הכפופים.
עיניך אליך יסברו, ואתה נותן להם את עדלם בעיתו.
פותח את ידיך, מסביר לכל חי רצון.
צדיק אדוני בכל דרכיו, וחסיד בכל מעשיו.
קרוב אדוני לכל קורב, לכל אשר יקראו באמת.
רצון יראיו יעשה, ואת שבעתם ישמע ויושיען.
שומר אדוני את כל אוהב, את כל ראשים ישמיד.
תהילה אדוני ידבר פיו, ויברך כל בשר שם קדושו לעולם ועד.
ואנחנו נברך יה, מעתה ועד עולם. Hallelujah. Page 218.
You do this one better than I do.
I don't know. I can't imagine that, but there you are.
I'll do it with you.
Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. El Bikocho, hallelujah, hallelujah, Brakia Uzo. Hallelujah, 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 big burotav, hallelujah, hallelujah, kerov good Lord. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah,
Hallelujah.
hallelujah, hallelujah, b'teika shofar, hallelujah, hallelujah, b'nevel v'chinor. Hallelujah, 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 b'tov umachol, hallelujah, hallelujah, b'minim v'ugav. Hallelujah, 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 b'tzil tzalei shama, hallelujah, hallelujah, b'tzil tzalei truah. Kol hanshamate hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol hanishamate hallelujah, hallelujah. Page 223. And we rise for Chatzi Kaddish.
That right page? Or is it one
Sorry,
of-
224. There we go.
Yikadal v'yikada shemei rabba.
Amen.
V'yama divrach hirute. V'yamlich malchute. V'chayechon uv'yamechon. Uv'chayedecho beit Yisrael. Bagala, bagala. Uv'izman kariv. V'maru. Amen. Yeheshme Rabba Mevorach Le'alam Ulome Omaya Yitbarak Yitbarak V'yishtabak V'yitpa'ar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yitalel V'yitalal Shemei Kedusha
Barichu.
Leila min kol birchata v'shirata
Tushbechata v'nechemata damihiran bialma.
Vimaru.
Amen.
And we continue standing for the Baruch Hu, our call to worship. Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamivorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed. And please be seated as we continue on page 228 with Yotzer Or, that prayer that says, wow, isn't God's creation so amazing? And the key words there in the middle are Ma Rabu Ma'asecha Adonai. How amazing, how expansive are the incredible works of God. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvorei choshech, osei shalom uvorei et hakol, hameir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha barachamim, uvtuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reshit, ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita, mala ha'aretz kinyanecha, titbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shevach ma'aseh yadecha, Ve'al me'orei or she'asita yifa'arucha sela. Or chadash al Tzion ta'ir. V'nizkei chulanu mehera le'or'o. Baruch atah Adonai yotzer ha'me'orot. Page 232, and we rise for Shema. That's you.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, B'ru Shem Kavod, Malachuto Le'olam Vaed.
Right there. Please be seated, and we're going to continue with the Haftarah.
V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, v'chol levavecha v'chol nafshecha v'chol miodecha, v'hayu hadvarim ha'elek, asher anochi mizavcha, hayom al levavecha v'shinamtam levanecha, v'shibatach. Bam, b'shivtecha b'veitecha, uvlatecha, v'derek Ushak becha uvkumecha ukshatam vayot ayudecha v'chayu l'totafo bein einecha uktev tam al mezuzot beitecha uvish alecha l'ma'an tizkuru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai ya'asitem kedoshim le'elohechem Anochi Adonai Elohechem Asher Hotzeti et ke mitzvohim le'er.
Oh, sorry. Hotzeti etchem me'eretz
Mitzrayim le'liot lechem Elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem.
Adonai Elohechem emet. Yasher koach. Good job.
Must have been her Hebrew teacher.
Must have been.
Good job, Rose. I'm proud of you.
We continue on page 235. When justice burns within us like a flaming fire, when love evokes willing sacrifice from us, when to the last full measure of selfless devotion, we demonstrate our belief in the ultimate triumph of truth and righteousness, then your goodness enters our lives and we can begin to change the world. And then you live in our hearts and we, through righteousness, behold your presence. Page 239. The eternal truth is that you alone are God and there is none else. May the righteous of all nations rejoice in your love and exult in your justice. Let them beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Let nation not lift up sword against nation, nor learn war anymore. You shall not hate your brother or your sister in your heart. The stranger that sojourns with you shall be accepted as your equal,
For you
for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Why do you crush my people and oppress the poor? Asks God. We know the Eternal One defends the poor and upholds the rights of the needy. Praise to God Most High. Blessed is God, deserving of blessing. On the following page, we join in our song of freedom.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot, o sefela, o sefela.
שירה חדשה שיבחו גלים לשמך על שפת הים. יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
Sur Yisrael, Kuma Bezrat Yisrael, Uvdechinu Mecha Yehuda Yisrael, Go Aleinu Adonai Zevat Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch Atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael.
We continue with Amidah, page 242. Please rise. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open our lips that our mouths may declare your praise.
Adonai sifatach tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, Ve'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chastei Avot V'Yimahot, U'Mevi Gula Lifnei V'Nehem, L'Ma'an Shemo B'Ahava, Melech Hozer U'Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Abraham Bezrat Sarah. Atah gibor le'elam Adonai, Mechaye hakol atah ra lehoshia, Morid hatal, Mechachel chayim bechesed, Mechaye hakol berachamim rabim. So make no flame ve'rofei cholim, Umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato, Lishenei afar, Michamocha ba'al kivurot, Umido melach, Melech meimit umechaye, Umatzmiya Yeshua, V'ne'eman ata l'chayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechaye hakol. Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam, Keshem shemakdishim oto b'shmei marom, Kakatuv al Yaneviecha, V'charazel ve'amar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Zevaot, Melochol ha'oretz, Kivodo, Adir Adoreinu Adonai Adonenu Ma'adir Shimcha B'chol ha'oretz, Baruch Kivod Adonai Mimkomo, Echad Hu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshienu V'Hu Yashmienu, Barachamav Le'nei Kol Chai, Ani Adonai Elohechem, Yimloch Adonai leolam, Elohai Yixion, Ledor Vador. Hallelujah. Ledor Vador Nagid Gad Lecha, El Netza Nitzachim, Kedushatcha Nagdish. V'shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush leolam va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai
Ha'el
Kadosh. Please be seated and continue page 250,
Let's do Vishamru. We didn't do
With-
it last night.
the
That's
Shamru.
okay.
Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat
La'asot
et
et ha-Shabbat
ha-Shabbat
לדורותם
לדורותם
ברית
ברית עולם.
עולם. let's see, בני ובן בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת
לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ,
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת.
לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת.
לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
Page 255. On this holy Shabbat, may we draw near to life, to peace, to joy. May we find rest, holiness in our deeds, worth in our study of Torah. Let us feed on the love of goodness. Let us drink from the love of goodness, restrain our thirst for excess, and cleanse our hearts to serve life well. On this holy Shabbat, may we draw nearer in life, in peace, and in joy. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otcha levadcha b'yirah na'avod. Page 256. Actually, 257. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies, filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations.
Modim anachnu lach.
For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons.
Modim anachnu lach.
For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements.
Modim anachnu lach.
For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression.
Modim anachnu lach.
For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared.
Modim anachnu lach.
For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom.
Modim anachnu lach.
For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose.
Modim anachnu lach.
We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot. And our prayer for peace, top of page 258.
Sim, shalom,
Sim. Sim,
Sim
shalom,
shalom
sim.
tova uveracha. Chen bechez. I don't really know this. I didn't teach in Hebrew school, so
Okay.
I never learned. Yeah, so
I can't pick it up in the middle.
that's it.
But we can read it.
We can read it.
Grant us peace, your most precious gift, O eternal source of peace, and give us the will to proclaim its message to all the peoples of the earth. Bless our country as a safeguard of peace and its advocate among the nations. May contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes. Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among the inhabitants of our world. Plant virtue in every soul, and may the love of your name hallow every home and every heart. Baruch atah Adonai, hamevarech et amo Yisrael, bashalom. We take a few moments for silent prayer.
Say shalom bimroma. Uya say shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Vimru, vimru, amen.
Yahaseh shalom, Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yahaseh shalom, Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
Vimru, amen.
We turn to page 371, and we think of all those in the world, people we know, people we don't know, friends and family who need our blessings of healing. Healing of body, of mind, of heart, of soul. In our congregation, we mentioned Jacob Adams and Pat Hanna, Doug Ford, Steve Toddleben, Michael Goldman, Linda Lyons, Merv Weinman, Diane Levy, Robin Lewis, Jeannie Neibauer, Frank Fusaro, Katie Alaya, Renee Goldman, Phil DeFrancesco, Jay Kaler, Debbie Perry, Amy Doherty, Dick Metcalf, Joan Rosenthal, Ilya Presbyshuk, Julie Matthews, Dane Marcinowski, Maggie Lee, Nyack Grinberg, Stacy Mason, Bridget Mueller, Mary Ann Piscatelli, Cheryl Marcinowski, Linda Whitmershouse Masick, and if anybody who is joining us via live stream has a name to add, please add it into our chat box. And if anybody is here and would like to share a name, please do so.
Marie Anthony.
And we join in our prayer for healing.
Misheberach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu mikor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Shabbat Shalom. So this week we are reading Parshat Kiddushim, holiness. What does it mean to be holy? We talked a little bit last night about that. And I thought this morning we would just spend just a few moments, because this is such a great text. Because it has in it so much of how we live our lives. And one of the sections that I just wanted to kind of think about for a moment is here in verse 9. And it says, when you go to harvest. Now, have any of you ever grown a garden? How hard is that? Not hard? Didn't work? Yeah, it never works for me either. I have a garden of weeds is what I end up with. Right? So it's hard to grow stuff, right? Farmers work really hard at it. And here they say, when you go to harvest your land, you don't get to keep everything that you grow. The edges of your field, the corners of your field are not yours. They belong to anybody who needs it. They belong to the hungry, the poor. Not only that, you can only harvest your field once. And that often is actually a very common technique, is you have waves of harvesting. So you harvest, there's a first wave that you harvest a bunch of stuff, and then you go back through and you harvest other parts, and that's called the gleanings. Right? But in our tradition, our text says, no, you don't get to have that stuff. That's your contribution to society, to the world. And in a sense, what the text is really saying is, don't think you did this all by yourself. Right? Don't think that you, just because you watered it and you weeded it, don't think that this is all just you. Right? God had a role to play in the creation, in the natural elements and rain and sunshine and earth and nutrients and all of that stuff. That just wasn't you. And so your obligation is to give back a little bit. So you get to keep the majority of it, but you have to give a little bit too. And I think that's such a wonderful model, that we work hard, we have what we have, we are blessed with whatever blessings we have, and we can give a little back. And so we try to have these opportunities, throughout our experiences of being able to give back a little bit. Because then right underneath it, it says, don't steal. In a sense, making the connection that don't misunderstand that everything that you make is not yours. Understand that it's not. And that you need to leave that for the people who need it most. And then the text goes on for a whole long series of random topics, everything from relationships to what happens when strangers live amongst you, and what are obligations to care for those strangers amongst you. And then there's a whole series of rules about who can marry whom and under what circumstances. And so what seems to be, what emerges is this message of society functioning. So society needs us to contribute, to think about the larger whole, and to care for everybody within that group, whether or not they're actually members of the Israelite community or not. And I think that it's a recognition that we were never a homogeneous society. We always had people in our communities who were Jewish or Israelite in the ancient world, and also people who were not necessarily, but who were certainly connected and part of the community. So with that, Shabbat Shalom. And we are going to continue with Aleinu on page 282 or
586.
586.
Please rise. Please rise. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latekdu lagilot ser bereshit, shalo asanu kagoye haratzot, velo samanu kamishpachot hadama, shalo sam chalkenu kahem, vigor aleinu kifo hamonam, vanachnu korim, Umishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu shehu noteh shamayim v'yoser haaretz umoshav yikaro b'shamayim ima'al ushchina tuzo b'govei meromim Hu Eloheinu Einod, Emet Malkeinu Ephes Ulato, Kakatu Betorato, Biadata Hayom, Bihashivota, Elevavecha, Ki Adonai Hu HaElohim, Bashamayim Imahal, Ve'al haaretz, mitachat ein od. V'ne'emar, v'haya Adonai, lemelech al kol haaretz, bayom hahu, yiyeh Adonai echad. Ushemo echad. Please be seated. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and of death. And in this particular week, this week in which we commemorate Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day, day of remembering so many thousands who died defending the state of Israel, both as part of the armed forces and also those killed in any terror attacks. And in our congregation, we observe yahrzeit for Leonard Rubin, Ida Lechner, Marilyn Cohen, Robert Kay, Gertrude Myers, Abraham DeRoy, Rose Lancet, Arthur Rosenberg, Julius Levin, Philip Green, Eli Sobel, Abraham Lucas, Arthur Schuster, Emil Bernheimer, Lottie Wolf, Selma Rubenfield Aronovitz, Seligman Strauss, Annie B. Goldstein, Sam Rosenbaum, Ruth Blick Silver, Faye Oppenheimer Davis, and Samuel Silverstein. If anybody would like to add a name either in our chat box or here in person, please feel free to do that. And so we rise together as we turn to the words of Kaddish on page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ba'alma divrach ritev yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, b'agalav izman kariv v'imru, amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'alam u'lalmeh almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudsha barichu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechamata. Damiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama Rabba min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Please be seated. We have just very few announcements. Ooh. That wasn't one of them. So we have no Gesher tomorrow. Rose is going to be very upset, I know. No Gesher tomorrow, but we do have our upcoming annual meeting, June 5th at 5 o'clock. And it'll be a great opportunity to end Shavuot together. We'll do Havdalah together for Shavuot and have a little Shavuot treat and also have our annual meeting. And other than that, everything is well, and we're looking forward to next week. So Shabbat Shalom, give us a few minutes if you're joining us online to reset and go into the library, and we are going to continue with Torah study. And Rose, Yasher Koach, thank you. I know you're getting excited, a few more weeks. You're not getting excited? You are. You are. Good. Okay. Great. Shabbat Shalom. Okay, sure. Yeah. Right.
It was just, because it was such a break, you know, we just have so many.
All right.
Yeah. I still have a whole bunch. Oh, I do. Yeah. I'm a visual person, so usually I picture my schedule.
Yeah.
Are we still on?
Just your communication directly with.
Ugh. There you go. Come on, Gabby.
The recall had like, they got word it was coming from corporate. They hadn't even been issued yet. And so they, yeah, so I had to remember. So I had paid for like a 2013 Subaru, and then I was tooling around in like a 2019 for 3 months, which was great. I mean, the miles weren't going on my car.
So you're another fantasy room?
I am, yeah. This is, I have a cross truck now, which is great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lots of
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
Excellent.
I don't remember.
Eric, did you get Tariq's latest email from earlier this week? I was like, I can't even.
Is that that speaker we're supposed to have?
Yeah, he's just a little confused with dates.
Oh, okay. Where's your mom? Your mom's?
My mom is actually at a bar mitzvah this morning. One of her friends, grandsons.
Where we are at. Brad's not here. No, it's terrible.
Yeah, small crowd.
Brad is sick.
Ken is Ken's with KI. I got through
Doing it through Kushana.
No, don't worry. Like, I'm not bringing in like a
Well,
caterer for a wedding.
Yeah, I mean, you make it as big or as
I know.
intimate as you want.
Just
So.
see,
Yes.
just see funny videos on my wedding. I'm like, oh, Brad's been watching because he's like, please tell me they're not doing that for him. So I'm like, don't worry. Like, me of all people, I'm not doing anything.
I think you're going to invite 400 people.
Oh, yes. Minimum. So it costs more than some way.
Tell Brad he's got to do a 35-minute speech. That'll go over well. All right. So, Shabbat shalom, everybody. I'm just going to pull up the text.
Nothing. Just
Somewhere in Judges 3, I think.
okay, yeah, my thing auto went to Judge 3, so.
And so, there we go. That's the text if anybody needs it. Okay. Okay, so let's join in our blessing for study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Very good.
I think around 10, 11, 12, something like that.
Something to that effect. So we are. I actually think it's a little later. I think we're at 15.
Yeah, because the guy with the withered hand.
Yeah.
Yes. The left-handed guy.
We're just getting up to the left-handed guy, yeah.
Yep.
With 6 fingers on his left hand. No?
This is the prince, the
Princess Bride.
Princess Bride, yeah.
Prince Humperdinck.
No, I'm trying to think of the response, yeah.
I know. It's inconceivable, the response. You keep on using this word, but I do not think you know what it means.
Is that one Inigo Montoya?
All wisdom comes from Princess Bride. You realize that.
You killed
Life
my
is
father.
pain, Highness. Actually, when Mandy Patinkin was here, almost like right before the virus all hit, he came into the show, and of course, in any show he does, everybody wants him to say the line, right? So he brings a kid up on stage and says, "Do you know who I am?" And the kid's like, ah. He's like, "Well, have you seen this like old movie? Oh yeah. He said, "Oh well, do you want me to do the line?" He said, yeah, okay. So he does the line, and everybody's cheering and whatever. It's very funny. He's actually a very talented Yiddish musician.
Yeah.
He has a large repertoire of Yiddish material. Yeah. Mama Lushan. It's his Yiddish show.
Oh my gosh, I just looked it up. There's 4.
In the Hank Greenberg movie, he starts off the movie singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" in Yiddish.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yep. He's got a cute couple like YouTube videos out around that they put out during the pandemic about saying motzi with his dogs, and it's this whole thing. Anyway, okay, so here we go, chapter 3:15. Well, again, we're in that cycle, right? So the Jews sort of abandon God. They then get persecuted. Then they cry out to God, kind of, recognizing that God's really the one in charge. So here we go. The Israelites cried out to the Lord. The Lord raised up a champion for them, Benjaminite Ehud, the son of Gera, a left-handed man. Now, what does it mean to be a left-handed man?
Like me?
But he's always right.
Yeah. Oh, he's never right.
Never right.
So in the ancient world, across cultures, left is seen to be in some ways sinister or evil or connected with.
That's where that comes from. Bar sinister. Bar Simon, Bar sinister. Evil.
Yeah. So in Hebrew, the word for left is small. And there's some theory that it comes from something of the Latin for sinister, sinistra, and whatever, but there's no real proof to that. It's one of these, sort of Hebrew urban legends of where these words come from. Yeah, but not every single Hebrew word, I mean, in modern Hebrew, you have great Hebrew words like hamburger. So while Hebrew as a language and construct and everything else is much older than Latin or whatever, not every Hebrew word, there's actually a whole ministry of the government that is responsible for word creation. And they have to figure out what we're going to call different things.
When Israel was formed and then they declared that
Can you talk louder because I can't?
Oh, sorry. When Israel was formed and they were going to designate Hebrew as the official language, Was Hebrew effectively kind of like what you call a dead language at that point? Because
Well, Hebrew had gone through a renaissance beginning in the early Zionist period, so in the 1890s, right? So you had these, you had a movement, especially in Eastern Europe, that was pushing back against what was more or less, kind of established Jewish sociology, which was essentially living in a shtetl, speaking Yiddish, whatever. And this was this new Jew that people were creating, which left Yiddish behind because Yiddish was it was a European language, right? Yiddish is a Germanic structured language written in Hebrew or written in Aramaic, actual characters. But its structure is Germanic. It's not a Semitic language at all. Right? So it was seen as this culturally imposed language, right? And the idea was to reclaim your roots, right? Go back to the pure Hebrew. So guys like Eliezer ben Yehuda create the first real modern Hebrew dictionary. In Eastern Europe, you start getting the creation of these sort of youth movements, Zionist youth movements, and Zionist camps, and the gymnasium, which was this sort of learning where people would have a chance. Kids would go and they would learn modern sort of conversational Hebrew, and then they would go to these like summer camp kind of things, and they would essentially recreate what it would be like for them to move to Eretz Israel or what was then Turkish Palestine. Right? And so there were whole waves of immigration that in the same waves of immigration that brought 3 out of 4 American Jews to this country. They also brought huge waves of people to what was then Palestine under Turkish rule. And so you had these series of kind of like training camps where they would take them and they would teach them Hebrew and they would change their names, and then they would show up in Israel as, instead of Shlomi Yoiskevitz, suddenly it was David Ben Ami, this pure kind of Hebrew name, which still actually even today is maintained as a kind of rite of passage of making Aliyah, that you sort of take on a more Hebrew name. So in most of in rabbinic circles, our colleagues called it the rabbinic two-step. So suddenly, instead of Rob, you became Ruvain. Instead of Michael, you became Michael. And you would sort of take on this Hebrew pronunciation, right? And that was very, very powerful. And in a sense, what they were saying was, they were leaving behind this image of the oppressed Jew from Eastern Europe, the victim essentially, and now you were going to create this new Jew who was self-sufficient and brave and able to fight and all of those kinds of things. And it was a very important process. And so by the time Israel is created 50 something, almost 60 years later, Israel is already well established as a spoken language. Right? Now, that's not to say that the rank and file who came out of Eastern Europe weren't also speaking Yiddish. They were, for sure. But there was a pretty strong feeling, even especially after the end of the Shoah, to leave that behind. To leave the image of the Eastern European shtetl Jew behind, and emerge as this new Jew, right? So leave the lamb to the slaughter image in Europe, and now emerge as a force to be reckoned with.
What do the Orthodox, who will not speak Hebrew conversationally but only Yiddish, do in the Knesset during meetings?
So not only in Knesset, I mean, when they're in business conversations or just generally on the street or whatever, they speak Hebrew.
They do speak Hebrew.
Yeah.
Huh.
But they will distinguish between modern Hebrew and sacred Hebrew. They'll when they pray, they'll pray in Ashkenazic Hebrew, and of course modern Hebrew is done in Sephardic pronunciation. So it's a little bit different, but basically, in order to sort of exist in Israel, you've got to be able to, well, either that or you have to speak English, but really, you do have to. I mean, in order to order things and exist as part of the society, you have to be able to speak Hebrew. I mean, there's no getting around that, right? So they do what they have to. Now, that's not to say that everybody does. And for instance, the women probably don't, because they have less outside influence and outside impact in those societies. But they're very much rejecting of this concept of Hebrew, because the idea was that Hebrew was the sacred language, the language of prayer, the language of Torah, and was not to be used for general discourse and conversation. So even in the Talmudic period, when you had Aramaic was the language of discourse and business and everything else, and Hebrew was the language of prayer and study. And so but now of course you've got Hebrew as kind of and modern Hebrew really does follow a Semitic language format, like grammar and structure and everything else. So I don't know what that is, but anyway. Okay, so here we are. The Israelites cried out to God. God establishes this Benjaminite, Ehud of Gera, who's this left-handed guy. We have no idea why it's important to have this, statement that he's left-handed. Except that to say that, maybe it could have been something like he was a sort of unsuspecting leader, right? This was not necessarily the guy that you would expect to be appointed as a leader, but he was. So it happened that the Israelites sent tribute to King Elgon of Moab, and through him. So Ehud made himself a two-edged dagger, a gomed in length, which he girded on his right side under his cloak. So he's hiding this weapon.
What is a gomed? What is a gomed?
About that long. I have no idea.
It's just a unit of measurement.
It's some unit of measurement, but I have no idea what that might be. I mean, a cubit I know, but I've never actually really looked at what a gomed is. And I don't think there's any note. But if somebody wants to look it up, that'd be great. Okay, so he presented the tribute to the king of Elgon of Moab. And now Elgon was a very stout man, means he was fat, right? And when Ehud had finished presenting the tribute, he dismissed the people who had conveyed the tribute. But he himself returned from Pisilim near Gilgal and said, "Your Majesty, I have a secret message for you." Elgon thereupon commanded silence. So all those in attendance left his presence. And when Ehud approached him, he was sitting alone in his cool upper chamber. Ehud said, "I have a message for you from God." Whereupon he rose from his seat, reaching with his left hand. Ehud drew the dagger from his right side, and drove it into Elgon's belly.
Chapter 3. Yeah, okay.
And here's where it gets, quite graphic in detail. The fat closed over the blade, and the hilt went in after the blade, for he did not pull the dagger out of his belly, and the filth came out.
Yeah, I gotta love it.
I'm sorry if anybody just had breakfast. But there is a graphic description here. I mean, oi, do we need all of this? I mean, do we really need to know all of this graphic detail? I mean, it just sounds so almost gratuitous, right?
To me, I think back to the chapter 1 and Adonai Bezek, who got his thumbs and toes chopped off. And that was quite, that's
Also gratuitous.
gratuitous, gives you a nice image. And I just have to think that this is, it's of that strain of storytelling. We have these, and I'm looking forward to more graphic stories, if this is, the Israelites will repent. The Lord will say they're there. They'll get into trouble again, but interspersed, I'm hoping for more graphic stories.
Who needs who needs Stephen King when you have Judges, right?
Right.
But what is it? I mean, first of all, what's he done here?
An assassination.
Yeah, it's an assassination, right? I mean, it's really, it's not it's not a war, right? They were not combatants on a field. They were, he took him by surprise. Perhaps the left-handedness is so that he could attack him unawares. That because you would be looking for a right-handed attack, somebody reached with their left-handed, Of course, that's the other great wisdom from Princess Bride. I know something you don't know. I am left-handed. I really don't know what that keeps doing, but anyway. And then what does he do? He eviscerates him, basically. Now, if any of you know sort of that wound process, it's going to be a slow and nasty way to go. Because he could live for days. Until some, infection, sits in, and eventually he would die.
But also
stepping
in
in,
which organs he lacerated.
Sorry, Joel, say that again.
It depends on which organs he lacerated. Or if the guy is Zospig, he has a little bit of additional protection there, I guess.
Well, I mean, it seems. I mean, they're being pretty graphic here, right? So it seems like he cuts his intestines, right?
Right, because my translation says excrement came out. So, and then later in the text it says they thought he was relieving himself. So, hence the smell,
right?
Contamination,
right? Which is a nasty business in terms of like infections and all the rest, right? I mean, this is not going to end well. And stepping out into the vestibule, Ehud shut the doors of the upper chamber on him and locked them. After he left, the courtiers returned. When they saw that the doors of the upper chamber were locked, they thought he must be relieving himself in the cool chamber. They waited a long time, and when he did not open the doors of the chamber, they took the key and opened them. And there their master was laying dead on the floor. So he's bled to death, basically, right? But Ehud had made good his escape. While they delayed, he had passed Pisidim and escaped to Serah. When he got there, he had the ram's horn sounded through the hill country of Ephraim, and all the Israelites descended with him from the hill country, and he took the lead. "Follow me closely," he said, "for the Lord has delivered your enemies, the Moabites, into your hands." They followed him down and seized the fords of the Jordan against the Moabites, and they let no one cross. So they essentially the bridges, right, the passageways across the river. On that occasion, they slew about 10,000 Moabites. They were all robust and brave men, yet not one of them escaped. Right, so this is showing kind of the extraordinary nature of this event, right? That this was not simply something that just happened, that clearly this was in some ways aided by God. Right? This was extra human. On that day, Moab submitted to Israel, and the land was tranquil for 80 years. Right? So boom, now you've just, you're jumping here, right? This is the sort of genre, or the way the texts are written is you have these periods of event, and then everything's quiet, and then you have more event, and then everything's quiet. And after him came Shamgar, son of Anat, who slew 600 Philistines with an ox goad. He too was a champion of Israel.
What is an ox goad?
Oh,
It's about Gomed Long. No.
Here it is.
What, Eric?
It is a stick with a hook on it, and you use it for prodding cattle and making them and herding cattle.
In other words, to goad the ox.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So my question here is what's the lesson we take away from this? Is it that God will always come to our rescue, and his threat at the beginning of this chapter, which is "you're on your own, I am never coming to help again," is an idle threat? Or maybe next time he's not going to come. I mean, I don't know what to make of this. God really makes a very clear statement at the beginning. This is the last time you're on your own.
Right.
And now we have this extraordinary, we've just, landed 10,000 Moabites.
And it's done in such a way that it is hard to believe that it wasn't inspired by God or helped by God in some way.
Right.
The problem is that we don't have anything here that says, "Oh, so God slew the Moabites."
Right.
Or, God did this or God did that. We don't have it.
To me, it's remarkable, or something out of Mission Impossible, that Ehud comes to the overweight leader and whispers in his ear, "I have a message from God," and then drives the knife in. Yeah. But again, Ehud got the message from God, but we don't hear it in the text.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very dramatic moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's pretty graphic. You can imagine, "I have a message from God."
Right. Yeah. There is nothing kosher about that slaughter.
Right. And yet, by him saying, "I have a message from God," how does it change the action? Or the perception of the action?
It's acceptable.
Yeah.
It's sanctioned.
Yeah, absolutely. It suddenly transforms it from assassination to justified killing.
And it's still hard to believe there wasn't a bodyguard that would stay, especially with a king. You know, when you have an Israelite giving tribute.
Yeah, I mean, well, there couldn't have been a bodyguard, otherwise the story doesn't work. But
Right.
Right? So, there. Don't confuse this with realities, right? I mean, this is not, this is not a history lesson. This is a how do you move the sort of story of Judges forward?
I still like the ox goad thing too, with 600 just with that.
Yeah, right. One guy, 600. Boom.
Where do you get the Samson?
Right. And then he's just using a jawbone.
Yeah.
Okay. So now guess what happens? Somebody want to read that next bit?
I'll start. The Israelites again did what was offensive to the Lord, Ehud now being dead.
Okay, so first of all, this is classic, right? So the leader has now died. People have now reverted back to negative behaviors. Here we go.
And the Lord surrendered them to King Jabin of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. His army commander was Sisera, whose base was Harosheth Goim. The Israelites cried out to the Lord, for he had 900 iron chariots, and he had oppressed Israel ruthlessly for 20 years. Deborah, wife of Lapidoth, was a prophetess. She led Israel at that time. She used to sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites would come to her for decisions. She summoned Barak, son of Abinoam of Kadesh and Naphtali, and said to him, "The Lord, the God of Israel, has commanded, go, march up to Mount Tabor, and take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun. And I will draw Sisera, Jabin's army commander, with his chariots and his troops towards you up to the Wadi Kishon, and I will deliver them into your hands." Or deliver him. But Barak said to her, "If you will go with me, I will go. If not, I will not go." "Very well, I will go with you," she answered. "However, there will be no glory for you in the course you are taking, for then the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." So Deborah, snap. So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. Barak then mustered Zebulun and Naphtali at Kadesh. 10,000 men marched up after him, and Deborah also went up with him. Now Heber, the Kenite, had separated from the other Kenites, descendants of Hobab, father-in-law of Moses, and had pitched his tent at Elon Bezanananim, which is near Kadesh. Sisera.
Okay, so stop there. Let's just kind of regroup. Okay. So we're introduced in chapter 4 to Deborah the prophet, right? Which is very unique in the literature, because we only have a couple women who feature in that kind of role, right? And she sits under this date palm, this palm tree, and she summons Barak, and she tells him.
She has no lineage, right? She doesn't come from anybody.
Very good.
She's simply the wife of Lapidot. Right?
Very good, because all the other guys were descended from Caleb or Benjaminites or whoever.
Right. She comes from nowhere.
Interesting.
But if she's a prophetess, then we can just assume she has direct conversations with God?
Mm-hmm.
Never makes her a prophet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we have Dvora Isha. Verse 4. Udevora and Devora, Isha Nivia, who is a woman, a prophet, Eshet Lapidot, who is the wife of Lapidot. So being a Navi is having this message flow through you from God. Now, we don't know what that message is yet, right? We don't know what her history is. As Eric said, we have no idea who this person is. She pops into the middle of this story with no introductions and no lineage. Okay? And she's summoning these leaders. Like, how does this all work? I mean, what's going on here? I mean, the last we saw, this was not the way Israelite society is structured. I mean, and all of a sudden we have this woman who seems to be totally in charge and able to summon whoever she wants, whenever she wants them. I think this makes no sense. Unless this is the same pattern of behavior, right? That God is exercising. God is choosing the unlikely leaders. Mm-hmm. The left-handed guy, now a woman. And not only is she chosen, but she is chosen as a Navi, a Neviah. Right? So she is given this very high status. I mean, not everybody gets to have tea with God, right? I mean, this is a big deal. And she summons him, and what does she tell him? That what's God's message? Excuse me, what's God's message?
Go and convince the people to go toward Mount Tabor and take with you 10,000 men.
Well, before that. Verse 6. She summoned Barak, son of Avinoam, of Kadesh and Naphtali, and said to him, God of Israel has commanded. Right? This is what God is telling us that we have to do. And then it goes on to the 10,000 and all the rest. But that piece ahead of time that says, she's the Navi, she's established and she's credited. So she's been vetted as the Navi. We don't know how or why, but she's there. And she says, okay, this is what God wants you to do. And what do they say?
Only if you come with me.
Yeah.
If she's really got a direct line to God, I can see why they would want her there. On site to make things go well. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, it's kind of it's an interesting question. If they really believe that she's the conduit of God's message, mm-hmm. Why do they need the insurance?
True.
Right? If they really think that she's the one that's, do they doubt her? They're calling her on the game?
And how is she going to draw Sisera up to the 10,000 men? What does she do? Say, all right, come follow me, Sisera?
Right.
could that also be a military maneuver? She attacks, seems to be overwhelmed and withdraws, and they chase after her, retreat, and enter into the trap. Could that be what it's describing?
Can't hear you, Craig.
Okay, could they be describing a military maneuver where she attacks him, seems to be overwhelmed, and then retreats, and they chase after him, and she leads the enemy into into the ambush that they have waiting for them? Just a possibility.
Yeah. I mean, she also says to them, okay, I'll go with you, but recognize that if I go with you, I'm going to get the credit. You're not.
Yeah. It's such an interesting thing to say.
Well, and read again how she says it. There will be no glory for you in the course you're taking, for then God will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman.
Yeah.
I mean, she is so manipulating their own sort of preconceived prejudices here, right? I mean, she has manipulated them beautifully. But she ends up going, right? So off we go. So Deborah went with with Barak to Kadesh. And Deborah goes into battle. Totally unique in the biblical text. Miriam never goes into battle. Right? Zipporah never goes into battle. Rachel, Leah, etc. We never see them, whatever, but she does. Is it? I mean, the questions are powerful in the sense of, well, why? I mean, why does the text need to have this story here? I mean, why is Deborah there? Why is it's clearly intentional? Because they make this whole big deal out of the fact that she's a woman and that she's going to get all the credit and that she's going into battle. But what's happening here? Okay, so somebody read beginning chapter, verse 11 there a little bit.
Now Heber, the Kenite, had separated from the other Kenites, descendants of Hobab, father-in-law of Moses, and had pitched his tent.
Stop. Who's Moses' father-in-law? It's not Hovav, it's Yitro. So who is this?
So did he have more than one wife?
But that doesn't Jethro, I think I've read he has like 7 different names in Torah and the writings.
Yeah.
Here's one of them. Yeah.
Right, but it is confusing.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, descendants of Hobab, father-in-law of Moses, and had pitched his tent at Elon Bezananim, which is near Kadesh. Sisera was informed that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. So Sisera ordered all his chariots, 900 iron chariots, in case you forgot, and all the troops he had to move from Haroset Goim to the Wadi Kishon. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Up, this is the day on which the Lord will deliver Sisera into your hands. The Lord is marching before you." Barak charged down Mount Tabor, followed by 10,000 men. Barak sounds like a Nebuch to me.
Well, he's clearly kind of following along. He doesn't display much in the way of leadership, right?
Right.
He says, she says, "Go attack," and he says, "Only if you come with me."
Right.
He's it's a bit of a mama's boy kind of a thing, right? When you wouldn't go into the store by yourself unless your mommy came with you, right? Okay, keep going.
The Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and army into a panic before the onslaught of Barak. Sisera leaped from his chariot and fled on foot as Barak pursued the chariots and the soldiers as far as Haroset Goim. All of Sisera's soldiers fell by the sword, not a man was left.
So a pretty devastating loss.
Yeah, it doesn't look good. Yeah.
Right? They're pretty decimated. Okay.
Right. But Benjamin is only showing his bravery charging downhill with 10,000 men after a panicked army.
I mean, Barak.
Barak, yeah. He's finally.
Right.
Sisera,
meanwhile, had fled on foot to the tent of Jael, wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was friendship between King Jabin of Hazor and the family of Heber the Kenite. Jael came out to greet Sisera.
So it's actually, so J's are Y's, so it's Yael.
Yael, okay, thank you. Yeah, okay, Yael. Yael came out to greet Sisera and said to him, "Come in, my lord, come in here, do not be afraid." So he entered her tent and she covered him with a blanket. He said to her, "Please let me have some water, I am thirsty." She opened a skin of milk and gave him some to drink, and she covered him again. He said to her, "Stand at the entrance of the tent. If anybody comes and asks you if there is anybody here, say no." Then Yael, wife of Heber, took a tent pin and grasped the mallet. When he was fast asleep from exhaustion, she approached him stealthily and drove the pin through his temple till it went down to the ground. Thus he died.
Okay. My daughter's namesake, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And every Yael that I've ever met is a very spirited person. Right. So clearly no love loss here.
What is this Sisera?
Sisera?
Sisera.
Yeah.
What's his story? What's his background?
Well, we don't know much in terms of it from here, but we do know that in other texts, he is, he's sort of the reigning king and he's deposed.
He's a reigning king. I mean, he's not an Israelite, is he?
No. He's a Moabite or a thisite or whatever he is. Let's see.
He's an enemy.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, the 900 chariots. Okay.
But again, the second time in the same story, a woman does the successful deed. Comes out of nowhere. We don't know anything about her, or very little about her. And
right.
She finishes off the opposing king. Right? 2 women heroes in one chapter seems there's a point.
3 unsuspecting heroes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. We've got left-handed guy, Deborah, and Yael.
Mm-hmm.
All who are unsuspecting and essentially inconsequential figures. Right. They don't, and clearly is it that he raped Yael in the tent in some way? Or did she kind of like sucker him in? She says, come into the tent and gives him something to drink and, tucks him in, sings him a lullaby, and then, smashes a tent peg through his head. Again, incredibly graphic, right? Like this is not, and, this is not an easy thing to do either.
A similar situation where a woman gets a man drunk and then cuts off his head. Somewhere, did you guys hear that? I don't think it's
a story of a woman who gets somebody drunk and then cuts off their head.
It's a biblical story, Solomon. I don't know. I don't think I'm making this up.
Well, we have Tamar who gets
Maybe
Judah,
Maybe
Judah and Tamar. So I mean, she gets Judah drunk and then sleeps with him, and then she holds it over his head.
I thought she cut off his head.
No.
Okay.
No.
Maybe
No, but he has to leave his
right.
staff and his
Right.
ring and whatever it was, his symbols, and then she comes back and says,
I think I'm thinking of something else. Where someone else gets drunk and falls asleep and then they'll. Never mind.
I'm wondering if you're thinking of, it's a Christian story, New Testament. It's,
No, I wouldn't be familiar with that. Sorry.
It's a famous poem too. That's how I know it.
I just thought it was.
I think that's what I was talking about too.
Sorry.
Sue, is that you were talking about the Salome
the heading of
story?
John the Baptist, yeah. And she serves it up. She serves up the head on a platter.
Literally,
Mhm.
like at dinner.
That's a famous
Well,
poem.
Okay.
You probably you might have seen it.
Solomon or Samson falls asleep and gets his hair cut off.
No, isn't it?
That's the end of the book. That's the end of Judges.
All right.
Right.
Sorry.
You're reading ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay. So they've killed Sisera, or Yael has anyway. We have no idea what her motivations are, though. Right. We just don't know. But now Barak appeared in pursuit of Sisera, and Yael went out to greet him and said, "Come, I will show you the man you're looking for." He went inside with her, and there Sisera was lying dead with the pin in his temple. Look what I did. On that day, God subdued King Yabin of Canaan before the Israelites. The hand of the Israelites bore harder and harder on King Yabin of Canaan until they destroyed King Yabin of Canaan.
Mhm.
And then actually and then number 5 begins what we call the Song of Deborah.
Mhm.
So we'll deal with that next time. But it's this series of unsuspecting and unintentional leaders, almost. Right? We don't anticipate that Deborah is going to be the one to or that Yael is going to be the one to kill the king, or the left-handed guy, or it's all these surprises.
So what surprise I'd like to see is you and a unitard doing the interpretive dance of the Song of Deborah.
Huh? It's good to have hopes and aspirations. Yes. Spandex and I are not on speaking terms. All right, everybody. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye-bye.